series insertion tube assembly, which includes CHA, camera head assembly, CCD. First we will open up body section. We'll first remove the cone and then body control rings. Using a pair of dull tweezers and some alcohol, slide tweezers underneath cone carefully as not to puncture plastic. Slide tweezers all the way around with alcohol to get alcohol underneath cone. Unscrew cone from body section. Be sure that when you turn cone that you're not turning insertion tube also, otherwise this will severely damage any wiring and light guide bundles. .200 series cone and body section attaches with O-ring here. Slide down cone to approximately 70 centimeters on insertion tube. This exposes the body control section with light bundles, biopsy channel, air water channel. Be careful at all times not to pinch, crush, or touch any of these tubings with your finger or any tools. Using a C-ring tool with extended file down C-ring pullers or Fuji machined special body section jig, we will unscrew the retaining lock ring from the body section. Finding the grooves on the body control ring, carefully unscrew counterclockwise. Be careful not again to pinch any of the light guides, air water channels, or biopsy channel. Once ring is fully loosened, carefully grip Fujinon body control section. Carefully slide down the body cover over light guide tubings, CCD wires, suction channel, air water channels. Pull down cover to 70 centimeters on insertion tube. We have now exposed the body control section. Again, be very careful as not to pinch any of the tubings and light guide bundles of CCD wire. Using the dull tweezers and some alcohol again, slide the tweezers underneath the body cone, which we will now remove, unscrewing counterclockwise. Slide this cone down approximately 6 inches down the light guide tube. Using a jeweler's flathead screwdriver, carefully pry up the Fujinon CE plate. This will expose the locking ring and O-ring underneath. Be sure to keep this and all screws in a safe place to use upon reassembly. Unscrew the retaining screw on the body side control panel with the flathead screwdriver, counterclockwise. Use tweezers if necessary to remove screw, which can be held in by plyo-bond glue. Retain the screw for reassembly. With thumb and forefinger, please remove this cover carefully, sliding it down approximately 6 inches down umbilical cord. We have now exposed the entire Fujinon internal body control section. Carefully turn your instrument around. We now work on the Eve connector. We will remove the wiring from the Series 200 setup board internal in this connector. Before we work on this connector, we must be sure that we are statically grounded using a approved static wristband which is grounded to a cold water pipe. First step is with a small jeweler's Phillips screwdriver, remove 2 Phillips heads from the Eve video connector. Again, making sure that we are statically grounded. Use a small needle nose pliers to pull out Series 200 video connector board. This exposes the Series 200 video setup board. Using a jeweler's Phillips screwdriver, remove 4 screws from the internal connector plate. Be sure to keep all these screws for reassembly. Once all 4 screws are removed, remove the top cover plate. This top cover plate is for EMI interference. You have now exposed the Series 200 setup PCB or CHA driver board. With a pair of needle nose pliers, clip down on EMI interference clip. This removes it from your plate. With a pair of small diagonal cutters, cut off the tie wraps which hold your camera head assembly video cable harness to the setup board. Be careful not to clip into the wire itself. You can now remove the board from the EMI plate, which will allow us to desolder the camera head assembly wires. A good trick of the trade is by using your small diagonal cutters to cut a small amount of wire on each contact, so as to, upon reassembly, you can solder each wire back to the exact color code of each wire. These wires are very small and is easily to confuse each color upon reassembly according to a color chart on a wiring diagram. So it is best to leave a tiny small amount of each wire on the contact. Again, as long as you are statically grounded, you can proceed to go ahead and cut each individual video wire and freeze frame button control wires, leaving a small amount of wires to match new CHA assembly cable to each contact on the Series 200 video setup board. Once all wires have been cut, we can put our setup board to the side. If you are reusing this board, be sure to keep it in a statically grounded or safe static proof bag. If this setup board has water damage to it, then it will need to be replaced. Easiest way to tell if it has water damage, if it is all corroded on each contacts, or if it is wet, it will need to be replaced. Remove wires from the EMI case. And finally cut ground to EMI case. Put EMI case to one side. Carefully slide wiring through the EMI ferrule, which is looped around twice. Slide freeze frame control wires, yellow and black, again also through the EMI ferrule. Slide off the EMI ferrule completely and keep it for reassembly. Using a white Teflon tape, we will wrap wires securely to be able to pull it through the umbilical section. Starting at the black ground wire, wrap your white Teflon tape tightly from the black ground wire all the way to the individual colored coax wires. Once you have completely wrapped the entire wire harness, cut off the excess. Twirl up end. This will allow us to pull the CHA wire harness through the umbilical section and body control section. Swap the video connector for your light connector section. Then now unscrew the light guide control section counterclockwise. This will allow us access internally to remove the light guide illumination bundle. Using a jeweler's Phillips screwdriver, remove the 3 Phillips head screws from the body control section closest to the light guide probe. This exposes the suction channel, air-water tubing, and the suction tubing. Using a small number 1 screwdriver flathead, unscrew counterclockwise the set screw in the light guide probe. It is covered by black RTV. Careful not to lose the set screw. You can leave it in the light guide probe once it is loosened. Using your jeweler's Phillips screwdriver, we'll need to unscrew the clamp which holds down the suction tubing to the body of the light guide connector. Once this is loosened, we can pull down the clamp. We'll need to disattach the suction channel from the body section of the light guide connector. Very carefully slide the clamp down from over the fitting down the suction tubing. The reason we need to remove the suction tubing is so we can pull the light guide illumination bundles through the umbilical cord without damaging them. We need to make extra room in the umbilical cord, and we need to replace the suction tubing in order to do this. Using a small flathead screwdriver, pry off suction tubing off the Christmas type fitting. Remove the clamp from the suction tubing. Put it along with all your screws for reassembly. Should be able to now slide out the ends of the light guides from the light guide tube. Gently pull on each light guide at the same time to pull light guides through this connector. If light guides are difficult to pull out from the light guide tube, it may be necessary to use a small hammer to gently tap the light guide tube to loosen the metal ferrule from inside the light guide tube. This can be done with a very small hammer or a small pair of pliers. Again, try pulling on the light guides at the same time. If they are loose, you can gently pull out the light guides. These light guides or illumination bundle are very sensitive and delicate and can be easily damaged. Underneath the gray is glass fibers. If this is pulled on too hard, or if it is bent or twisted or kinked, it will damage the internal light bundles, and then they will need to be replaced. So again, we stress that you're very careful when removing the light guides from the light guide connector and umbilical cord. Being extremely careful, turn the entire scope around so we can go back to work on the body control section. Lay the scope out along a long table. Be careful not to pinch the light guides and the CCD wire harness, which we just removed from the connector and the light guide tube. Again, lay the scope out long and flat. We will now remove the suction channel from the suction assembly. Using a phillips screwdriver, remove screw from the umbilical cord control holder. Usually it will be loose and you can push it up and out of the way. Be very careful not to pinch any wires. Light guide, suction channel, or air water channel. Push it up and out of the way. Using your Phillips screwdriver, remove Phillips screws from the umbilical control section. Using a permanent black marker, mark the position of the light guide umbilical tube to the control body section for reference. Remove the remaining 2 Phillips screws from the umbilical controlled section. You can now pull off the light guide umbilical tube down. This will expose the suction channel, the light bundles, the air water channels, and the CCD wire harness. Being extremely careful, pull down the umbilical tube to expose the suction channel. We will need to cut the suction channel off at this point because it is too difficult to cut through coil pipe which surrounds the suction tubing. Be sure you are able to locate the suction tube. You will need to carefully push aside the light guide tubes, air water tubes, and camera head assembly wire cable away from the suction tubing. If necessary, you can use a toothpick to keep all these critical tubes and light bundle away from the cutting area. Using a good pair of diagonal cutters, grab the suction tubing, again being sure that you're not cutting into any other wire or light guide, that they are out of the way and it is safe. You can proceed to cut the suction tubing just below the coil pipe. You will now need to remove the coil pipe from the suction assembly. But before we do that, we need to remove the light bundle from the light guide umbilical tube as not to damage it during removal of this coil pipe. In order to remove the suction tubing from the umbilical cord, you'll need to lay the scope out straight. Be sure that the light guide tube is laid out straight along the table. Using a pair of needle nose pliers, reach in, grabbing the suction tubing and the suction tubing only. Carefully pull out the suction tubing which we released down at the connector previously. Removing the suction tubing will allow us to remove the light guide illumination bundles without damaging them, because it is too tight in the umbilical light guide cord to remove them without removing this suction channel. We cannot reuse the suction tubing as now it is too short since we have cut it. It will be discarded and replaced with suction tubing Now that we have removed suction tubing, we will now remove the CHA camera head assembly wire harness from umbilical tube. Pull the first 3 or 4 inches through and leave a loop like that. Go back down to the video connector which was previously disassembled. Using a piece of ordinary tubing, find a size that fits over the camera head assembly wire harness, which we sealed in white Teflon tape. Slide the tubing over the white Teflon tape until it is sure that it will not slide off when we pull the cable harness through the umbilical cord. If need be, you can use a small piece of Scotch tape. But be careful to make sure it is very tight so it does not catch anything in the light guide umbilical tube. Be sure that the length of tubing is long enough to pull through the umbilical tube. This will allow us to pull back the CHA CCD wire harness through the umbilical cord easily upon reassembly. It will not be necessary to pull through freeze frame button yellow and black wires. Put those to one side. Again, be sure that your plastic tubing is tight and will not pull off when we pull through the CHA cable harness. Going back to the control body section, we can now pull on the loop which we made, which is the camera head assembly CCD wiring harness, pulling through the tubing which we attached on the end by the white Teflon tube. Pull the wiring harness all the way through till you pull the clear tubing through the entire umbilical light guide tube. Once you have reached the white Teflon tubing, remove the camera head assembly wire harness from your plastic tube and leave this tubing out for reassembly. Coil up your CHA CCD wire harness. for the time being until we pull it through the body control section. Using a piece of Scotch tape, hold the camera head assembly wire harness together and put to the side. Now that we remove the CCD wiring harness, you should be able to pull out the light guide illumination bundles from the light guide tube. It's done very carefully. Do not use any force when pulling out these light guide illumination bundles. Pull on both at the same time, carefully, one at a time. If for any reason they are still too tight, it may be necessary to additionally remove one or more of the air-water channels from the light guide tube. But usually you should be able to pull out the light guide bundle slowly and carefully. Again, stressing the fact to be very careful removing the light guide bundle. Remove it very slowly. Do not use any force whatsoever. Gently pull out the light guide illumination bundle from the umbilical tube. Pull the light guide tube completely out and coil it up as we did the CHA CCD wire harness. Keep them both to one side. We will now remove insertion tube ISA assembly from the body control section. We will start by pulling through our light guides, which we carefully just removed from our umbilical tube. We'll need to carefully feed our light guides through the body, again being very careful not to put any pressure on our light guides with either our fingers, instruments, or any pressure as far as kinking, bending, or excessive force while pulling it through the body. Carefully grab the two light guides from within this part of the control section, pulling them through both at the same time, using both hands, pulling and pushing with equal force. Carefully pull the entire length of the light guide through the body control section. Coil up and put to one side. Now we can find our camera head assembly CCD wire harness, which is black in color. Find this cable and carefully do the same. Pull it through the body control assembly. Never kink this wire either. Always loop it around. Any kinks will cause the internal wires to break. Carefully pull CCD wire through. Pull the camera head assembly wire completely through. Coil up and keep to one side. With the CHA CCD wires and light guide bundles out of the way, we can now safely remove the coil pipe which previously covered the suction tubing. Keeping the air and water channels out of the way, using an X-Acto knife with a sharp blade, go ahead and peel the coating which covers the suction channel coil pipes away, exposing the metal coil pipe underneath. This will take time and is a timely process, but it will need to be done in order to replace the suction tubing upon reassembly. Once you have cut most of the glue away from the suction channel spring guide protector, again be sure to cut all the glue away all the way up to the suction cylinder. Remove the glue by peeling it back. You'll now need to obtain a small Dremel tool with a small cutting wheel on it. What you will need to do is cut a small amount of the spring in order to peel it back from the suction cylinder. Again, this is super critical. Be sure to use a toothpick to pull the air-water channels aside. Using your Dremel with a small cutting wheel, cut a few of the ribs away, again being very critical as not to cut into the air-water channels or the biopsy channel underneath. Once you have cut a small amount of the ribs away from your suction cylinder, you can now peel off the spring guide so we can remove the remainder of the suction channel. If you do not have access to a Dremel tool with a small cutting bit, using a good pair of very small diagonal cutters, try to reach underneath one or two of the springs and cut. Again, being very careful not to cut into your air-water channels or your biopsy channel underneath or the gray ground wire. Cut as many ribs as you can in order to gain access to the tubing underneath. Once you have gotten to the tube underneath, carefully pull down the spring guide from the suction tubing underneath. Carefully pull down and off the spring guide off the remainder of the suction tubing. This isn't easy and takes a lot of time and patience. Be very careful when doing this. Do not rush it. Otherwise you will cause more damage to the internal parts of the endoscope. Using your tweezers, pull down any remainder spring from the suction tubing cylinder. Once all the glue is peeled away and metal coil pipe has been pulled down, you can carefully push off the old suction channel from the suction cylinder tube. We can discard the old suction tubing and the spring bed. Carefully clean out all the debris, including metal filings and plastic, that have been left inside the body with either compressed air or, if you don't have access to compressed air, you can use alcohol on some paper towel. You can use a toothpick and wrap some paper towel around the toothpick. Moisturize it with some alcohol and carefully wipe away all the debris that was left inside the body during cutting off this suction channel. In some instances you will be lucky and get an endoscope that does not have the coil pipe around the suction channel. That will make it 100% easier to remove the suction channel from the suction cylinder. Clean off any remaining plastic from the suction cylinder port. We will now proceed to remove the rest of the insertion tube assembly away from the body control section. You'll need to obtain a very small drill bit. This will allow you to unscrew the ferrules from the air and water channels. Fitting the proper small drill bit into the hole of each ferrule, unscrew counterclockwise and remove the air-water channels. It may be necessary to hold your clear air-water channel with some needle nose pliers when removing the ferrule. Pull off the ferrules off the air-water channels and save these for reassembly. We'll need to do the same for the biopsy channel. Using your small drill bit, carefully unscrew the ferrule holding on the biopsy channel. Be careful not to pinch your light guide's rear of the channels. Using a pair of tweezers, push off the ferrule which locks your biopsy channel onto the biopsy port. Then push off your channel. Next step is to unscrew the insertion tube assembly from the body control section. Using a black marker, mark where at the present the insertion tube is on the control body section. Using your Phillips screwdriver, unscrew all the Phillips screws around the body control section which hold on your insertion tube assembly. Leave one screw in for now and turn over the endoscope carefully. We'll now have to remove the angulation control wires. Remove the covers from the angulation control assembly by unscrewing 4 Phillips screws. Once screws are removed, carefully pry up and pull out angulation wire cover from body control section. This reveals the angulation control wires. Unscrew each ferrule from the up, down, and left, right cables. Do the same for both up, down, and left, right. Once all 4 cables have been unscrewed, remove the coil pipe retaining bracket. Retain for reassembly. Now the coil pipes are free. Free up both the up, down, and the left, right coil pipes and angulation wires. After removal of all 4 coil pipes from the holder, up, down, left, right, and we have disattached air and water channel and biopsy channel, we can now slowly remove entire ISA assembly, pulling through each channel wire, illumination bundle, and CHA wire assembly. Pull carefully through the scope after removing final Phillips screw from body control section. Taking your newly tested, refurbished ISA assembly, pull assembly up to the body control section. We will now pull through each channel, CHA CCD wire assembly, 4 coil pipes, the air, water, and biopsy channel. First we will start with our CHA CCD wire assembly. Pull this through.